I'll never forget the day I pulled up to that old farmhouse, the one everyone called worthless. The Oklahoma wind was wild that morning, whipping red dust across the dry fields like the land itself was trying to warn me away. I sat there in my beat-up Honda, hands tight on the steering wheel, staring at what my grandmother left me, 60 acres of dried-up dreams, and a house that looked like it had given up on breathing. My daughter Lily, just 8 years old, pressed her little hand against the window and whispered, "Is that where Grandma Chen lived?" Her voice was so soft, but it hit me hard. "Yeah, baby," I told her, even though I wasn't sure if this place was a blessing or a curse. The roof sagged, the barn looked like it had already surrendered to time, and the chicken coop leaned at an angle that made it look one gust away from falling. I'd driven 14 hours straight from Detroit with an eviction notice, 2 jobs that couldn't cover daycare, and an ex-husband who'd vanished with our savings and my faith in second chances. This old, crumbling property was all I had left. The lawyer had been kind when he told me, "You might get 20 grand for the whole thing if you're lucky." But luck wasn't something I ever had. Desperation, though, that I knew well. Sometimes, when you've lost everything, you start seeing hope in places everyone else has given up on. As I stepped out, the red dirt clung to my sneakers like the land wanted to keep me there. The air smelled like sage and old wood, like forgotten memories. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something strange, a quiet whisper that maybe, just maybe, this place was holding a secret it wasn't ready to give up yet. The front door wasn't even locked. It opened with a groan that seemed to echo through every corner of the house. Inside, time had frozen, dishes still in the sink, a calendar on the wall that said March 1982 and dust thick as snow covering everything. Lily ran her finger along the window sill, watching the dust dance in the sunlight. "Why did great-grandma live here all alone?" she asked. I didn't know what to tell her. My grandmother, May Chen, had lived in isolation for 40 years, refusing help, refusing visitors, refusing to explain why she'd cut herself off from the world. I spent that first day cleaning just enough to make 2 rooms livable. I didn't bring much, some canned food, sleeping bags, and the kind of fragile hope that keeps you moving when everything else is gone. That night we slept on the floor, the wind howling through cracks in the walls. I remember thinking that for the first time in months, no one could evict us. This broken house might not be much, but it was ours. In the middle of the night, I heard something, a rusty hinge creaking outside, maybe from the chicken coop. I told myself it was nothing, but deep down, something in that sound felt alive, like the house was whispering a story it had buried too long. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of my grandmother, standing by that same chicken coop, her eyes sad, her lips moving like she was trying to tell me something I couldn't yet understand. By morning, the sunlight turned the fields gold, and for a brief second, the land looked almost alive again. "It's pretty here," Lily said, her eyes wide. "Yeah, baby, a different kind of pretty," I told her. After a breakfast of instant oatmeal cooked on a camping stove, I decided to explore. Every creak in that floor sounded like a sigh from the past. In my grandmother's bedroom, I found photo albums so covered in dust they felt sacred. The pictures showed a woman I barely recognized, young, vibrant, smiling beside a man who looked like he carried the weight of the world in his eyes. My grandfather, Henry, they looked so happy once. But then, page by page, the light drained from her smile, the house behind her started to decay, and the man disappeared. It was like watching hope fade in real time. I closed the album and looked out the window. Lily was outside near the chicken coop. "Stay where I can see you," I called. She waved back. A few minutes later, she yelled, "Mom, look, the floor moves." I rushed out, my heart pounding. The chicken coop was rotting, walls leaning, the smell of earth and old feathers thick in the air. Lily pointed at a loose board on the floor. "See, it wiggles." I knelt down, expecting to see rot, but when I touched it, I froze. It wasn't old. The wood was newer than the rest. Someone had replaced it. My grandmother. Why? My fingers slid under the edge, and the board lifted too easily, revealing a hidden compartment carved into the ground. And inside was a metal box, old, green, heavy. My grandmother's initials scratched on top. MC. My breath caught. Lily's voice trembled. "What is it, Mom?" I whispered. "I don't know." But I did know. Whatever was inside that box was the reason my grandmother had lived and died alone. The lock was rusted. I grabbed a rock and hit it. The lock was rusted. I grabbed a rock and hit it once, twice, and on the third strike it snapped open. Inside was a silk-wrapped pouch and an envelope with my name on it, written in my grandmother's handwriting. "For Sarah, when you're ready to know the truth." My hands were shaking as I unwrapped the pouch, and the world stopped. Diamonds, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They sparkled in the morning sun, scattering rainbows across the dirt. I couldn't breathe. Lily gasped. "Mom, are they real?" I didn't answer, I just stared. Beneath the pouch was that letter, yellowed, fragile, but still sealed. My grandmother's handwriting was steady, her words deliberate. "My dearest Sarah," it began, "if you're reading this, then I am gone. What you hold was never meant to be found easily. These diamonds are not stolen, but they are not innocent. They are the price of a choice I made long ago, one that cost me everything." She wrote that my grandfather wasn't just a farmer. He was a geologist sent to survey the land for oil. But instead, he'd found something else, a massive diamond deposit beneath the property. A fortune. Enough to change our family's life forever. But before they could claim it, a man from the Bureau of Indian Affairs arrived, an Osage descendant named James White Crow, with proof that the land had been stolen generations ago during the Osage oil murders of the 1920s. My grandmother couldn't live with that truth. She made a deal, one box for them and the rest to stay buried. But my grandfather tried to take more. There was a struggle. He died that night, and James helped her bury him. My grandmother spent the next 40 years guarding the land, protecting its secret, our secret. "Now, Sarah," the letter said, "you must choose. Take the diamonds and build a life, or face the truth and make it right." My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Those diamonds could change everything for Lily and me. But I could already feel the weight of them, like they were made of gilt instead of stone. I must have read that letter a dozen times, each word heavier than the last. My grandmother had lived her entire life protecting a truth buried in the dirt, a truth soaked in blood. She'd written about the Osage families murdered for their oil-rich land, about how her own father had unknowingly profited from those same stolen acres. The diamonds were part of the restitution deal she and James White Crow made, one small box to keep them alive, the rest left in the ground to honor the dead. But when my grandfather tried to take more, tragedy struck. My grandmother had carried that guilt like a shackle until the day she died, and now she'd passed it to me. The letter ended with a phone number, "Robert White Crow," she wrote, "James's son. He knows the truth. Call him when your heart is ready." I sat there on the dirt floor of that chicken coop, surrounded by light bouncing off diamonds that could change my life, and I felt sick. They weren't just beautiful stones. They were ghosts, reminders of lives stolen, promises broken, justice denied. Lily tugged at my sleeve, her voice soft. "Mom, what are you gonna do?" I didn't have an answer. Part of me wanted to bury the box again and pretend I'd never seen it, but I couldn't. Not after everything my grandmother sacrificed to protect this land. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and dialed the number. A deep, steady voice answered. Robert White Crow speaking. My voice cracked when I said, "This is Sarah Chen. I found the box and the letter." There was silence for a moment, then he said, "I've been waiting for that call for 40 years. Meet me tomorrow. We need to talk face to face." The next afternoon, I drove into town to meet Robert at a small diner that looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. He was easy to spot, tall, with silver hair and eyes that carried generations of pain and patience. When he saw me, he stood and nodded. "You look like her," he said quietly. "Your grandmother, same eyes." We sat in a corner booth, and he pulled out a worn folder thick with papers. "My father told me everything before he died," Robert said. "About the deal, the diamonds, the fight that killed your grandfather." He looked me straight in the eye. "Your grandmother could have blamed my father and walked away clean, but she didn't. She shared his guilt. She became the guardian of what they'd buried." I swallowed hard. "And now it's my turn." He nodded. "You have the legal deed. You could mine it, sell it, or—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Or you could help us return it to its rightful owners." The Osage Nation would protect it as sacred ground, not a mine. My heart ached. "But if I give it back," I said, "I lose everything." He gave a faint smile. "Maybe not everything. You have your daughter, you have your name, and you'll have peace. That's something money can't buy." I sat there, torn between two impossible choices, the fortune that could save my daughter's future, or the truth that could heal someone else's past. Robert's voice softened. "My father used to say, some treasures aren't meant to be found, only protected. Maybe that's why your grandmother stayed." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hum of the old ceiling fan and the clink of coffee cups. By the time I left, I knew I couldn't run from this. The land had waited long enough for someone to do what was right. That night I sat on the porch, the box of diamonds resting on my lap, the stars scattered across the sky like the jewels themselves. Lily was asleep inside, her small breathing steady and peaceful. I looked out over the land, red earth, endless and silent, and I felt the weight of generations pressing down. My grandmother had spent her life guarding this secret, trapped by guilt and sorrow. But I couldn't do that to Lily. I wanted to break that chain. The next morning I made breakfast and told her everything, the diamonds, the stolen land, the choice we had to make. She listened carefully, her big eyes full of understanding far beyond her years. When I finished, she said simply, "The diamonds made everyone sad, Mommy. Maybe if we give them back, people can be happy again." I smiled through tears. Leave it to a child to see the truth so clearly. That afternoon, I called Robert. "I want to do this right," I told him. "The land should go back to your people, but I want something too." "What's that?" he asked. "A future for my daughter, not money, just a place to belong." He paused, then said, "My sister runs the cultural center. We've been looking for someone to help with the education programs, someone who understands the cost of history." I said yes without hesitation. The months that followed were chaos, lawyers, news crews, headlines calling me crazy for giving up $156 million. But when the ceremony came, when the land was finally returned to the Osage Nation, I stood beside Robert as they blessed the earth with sage and prayer. For the first time in 100 years, the land belonged to its true owners. A reporter asked what would happen to the diamonds still buried below. Robert just smiled. "They'll stay where they are. Some treasures aren't meant to be dug up." A year later, Lily and I moved into a small house provided by the cultural center. It wasn't fancy, but it was home, a real one. I started teaching children about the history of the Osage murders, about how greed can echo through generations until someone decides to stop it. Lily thrived at her new school, learning Osage words, making friends, and wearing the small silver pendant Robert gave us, one diamond from the box we'd returned. "So you never forget," he'd said. Sometimes I'd drive back to the old farmhouse. It's now a memorial, a museum honoring both the Osage victims and my grandmother's sacrifice. The chicken coop is gone, but the spot where it stood feels peaceful now, like the land finally took a breath. I still struggle some days, the bills, the long hours, but every time I see Lily smile, I know I made the right choice. I didn't just inherit a farm. I inherited a chance to change a legacy built on guilt into one built on justice. The diamonds may still sleep beneath that red earth, but their curse has lifted. And sometimes, when the sun sets just right, I swear the light off the soil sparkles, not like wealth, but like forgiveness. Years from now, when Lily tells her children this story, I hope she says her mother once had the chance to take a fortune but chose something better, peace. And if you're still listening, maybe you'll understand, too. The greatest treasures are the ones we keep, but the ones we have the courage to let go. Because money fades, fame fades, but doing the right thing, that lasts forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear that not all riches come from the ground. Some come from the choices we make above it.